4:01, so
There we go.
it's time to call this meeting to order. Today is Wednesday, August 6th, 2025, and it's our Open Space Clean Water Advisory Committee regular monthly meeting. With that, I will ask Brenda to take a roll call.
LaRue? Here. Padian?
Here.
Condi?
Here. He.
Pryor?
Here.
Bondi?
Here.
Dallas?
Here.
Bowen?
Here.
And Rayburn.
Okay.
Okay, so this is my first meeting, bear with me, everyone.
You're doing fast.
We're gonna move on to new business. So first up would be accepting or passing our minutes from the May 7th meeting. Do we have a motion to accept the minutes as presented?
I have a motion to accept.
We have a second. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Sorry, think fast.
That's all right, guys.
I know I can't see them anymore. Okay, do I need to redo that?
No, you're
Okay,
Nope,
motion
okay.
passed, okay. Next up on our agenda is a presentation from Boise State on the soil carbon sequestration project.
Yeah, and just to tee this up a little bit, so some members are new, but we did have Boise State work on this project for us. It's been going on almost 2 years. And so I know they came kind of midpoint, we're talking about some of their initial research, and this is kind of the final presentation of what they've come up with. So I will let you have my seat, just so you can, actually, you know what, I'm just gonna trade this. Actually, let's have you take Patty's spot.
Okay.
That'll work even better. And then you'll be closer to
Cool. Thank you. All right, thank you all. My first meeting too.
We're pretty laid back.
Yeah, and this is gonna be a pretty laid back presentation and we'll try to keep it quick. So questions at the end. So I'll go quickly through some stuff and then whatever you want to talk about afterwards is fine. Ooh, I went really far. Let's go back up here. Okay. Little background on what we're talking about, carbon stocks. A lot of attention is paid to carbon stocks in trees and forests and things like that. But the lion's share of carbon on land is actually in the soil. And don't need all the numbers on this figure, but the idea is that 4 times as much carbon is in the soil. For somewhere like the Boise Front Range, that number jumps to 10 or 20 times as much carbon in the soil as there is above ground in vegetation. So figuring out what's happening with the soil carbon stocks is really important when we start thinking about, you know, our carbon future and our carbon neutral goals and things like that. And if we're going to talk about landscapes, soils are actually the big place where you can stand to gain or lose a lot of carbon really quick. As we start to look at the landscape, we have to understand what drives soil carbon. Why does it accumulate? What can we shift the balance of in terms of land management, or what should we be scared about in terms of disturbance that will change how much soil carbon is on the landscape? The big ones are obviously climate and soil properties, but there's also vegetation type. And that's exactly what this study was kind of designed to get at, was how much soil carbon is associated with different plant types. If we see changes in plant communities, are we going to see changes in soil carbon, either for good or for bad? And we see vegetation change on these landscapes a lot. We see cheatgrass invasion, we see wildfire, we see shifting plant communities from climate change, and we see our land use effects. And some of those are historical. Some of these vegetation changes are still playing out from things that were done by the first settlers of this area. Those impacts are still coming through on this landscape. So it's not, while it may look constant, I've lived here my whole life. You look at Boise Front Range, doesn't look all that different. It's actually changing a lot with all of these disturbances. Okay, so the study specifically went after 4 dominant plant types on the Front Range. So we have short grasses and tall grasses. So cheatgrass being a short grass, you know, your wheat grasses and taller bunch grasses, Then perennial grasses, perennial shrubs, things like that. And then our upland shrubs, our sagebrush, bitterbrush, and things like that. So really across those basic functional types of plants is how we would see the landscape change dramatically. And we wanted to understand how much carbon is associated with those different plant types. So I'm just the talking head today. I'm the modeler. My stuff
You didn't
comes
do
at
this
the end.
travel here?
I didn't step 1 foot in the field for 8 years. So, but this team here, 173 miles with their GPS wristwatch and tracking every footstep. 2,000 soil cores, they pulled 1,000 pounds off the Front Range. Brought it all back to the lab to make an amazing data set. This is an unbelievable data set, and it'll be very, very valuable in the future. 10 years down the road, we want to say how much have things changed. The size of that data set is going to really put strength into that. More photos of the crew because I think they earned it. The lab group also earned it. So getting the soil samples is just half the battle. The lab works worse, more monotonous, sitting there day after day. But you can see the tremendous variability in the soils. The soil on the left and the middle has a lot of carbon in it. You probably recognize that from your garden. The soil on the right is a lot more what it looks like up there in the foothills, very little carbon. And to quickly boil down the results of just the data, what we really found is that underneath the shrubs, we have considerably more carbon. This fits with theory, this fits with your textbook, this isn't unusual. The perennial grasses aren't as high as we expected. We thought we would see this nice stair step across these 4 groups, and you do kind of see that, but the 3 groups to the left are all statistically the same. It's only the shrubs that really stand out. So it really emphasizes how important those shrubs are for maintaining soil carbon stocks. Okay, now we get to the part that I actually chipped in on. We take all the data points which are shown on the left in the different open space reserves, and we start to think about how do we extrapolate those point-based measurements into a map, into something we can actually put broad values on in terms of how much carbon is out there. So like I mentioned before, those controls on soil carbon, the things that will cause soil carbon to accumulate or decline, climate, vegetation, we can map those things. So the climate map, that's soil temperature. The vegetation map, that's productivity, that's how much plant growth is coming across the landscape. We can take a few other things and shove them into a model, a process-based model that essentially simulates the steps that carbon goes through in decomposition and stabilization. It's a mathematical model, but it represents kind of the real jump. Microbes eat this plant, it decomposes into the soil binds some of it up, it eventually respires, and it all goes around and around and around. So we have models that can kind of help us turn those spatial maps. They can use the data we collected from the point samples and then take the spatial data about what we know about the controls, and out the other side, we can get an entire map of soil carbon stocks at about a 30 meter squared resolution. That's a little bit bigger than this room. So 1 pixel on that map is this room. And we can go all the way across the landscape and come up with, there's about 1.5 million metric tons of carbon in the top 20 centimeters of the soil. If we go deeper, that number gets a whole lot bigger. But the top 20 centimeters is really the area that we're going to impact with land use, with plant communities. The lower portions of the soil can also be impacted, but it's to less of a degree and it's less certain and thing. We still have a lot to understand about deep soil. So a lot of these types of quantification efforts, we focus on the top 20 or 30 centimeters. So this is now a map that's available to the city and anybody else. And I split it out again by all the different reserves, just specific to the interests of the city. But the map itself is really fun to dive into. This picture doesn't really do it justice. You can zoom way down in and look at all these interesting things. We did find there's 3 reserves that fit exactly what we've studied before out of like the Reynolds Creek experimental watershed. There's 3 reserves that have more carbon than we would have expected based on that work. And that could be from historical land use or vegetation changes, like I said, that are catching up or something. And then there's one that kind of falls in. That's it. That's the whole story. If anybody has questions or not, that'd be great.
What were the 3 that had more than?
I knew it was gonna ask, and I meant to highlight them. It's, I believe, I'll have to email you, guys
Okay,
don't quote me.
no worries.
It's not the higher numbers necessarily.
No, it's not. And the reason we don't really go deep into that right now is we don't understand. We don't have a good reason why. I went diving through every spatial layer, everything I could find to figure out what's unique about those 3. No clue.
I think it included military polecat.
Okay,
Yeah.
So lower down.
yeah.
Yeah, there wasn't an obvious rhyme or reason to it at all. And really, when I do this type of work, it's far more common to find areas that are lower than we've expected. That there was extensive cattle grazing 30 years ago that we don't know about, and the soil carbon stocks are still recovering. This is the first time I've ever done a project like this, and I've had spaces that came out considerably higher than what I would have expected just on the climate and the vegetation data. So it could be something about fire history. It could be that there used to be more trees on the landscape. There could have been more shrub cover.
I run a polecat today. I do it a couple times a month from Cartwright Road. And I've noticed over the last 15 years of doing that there's been a change in the vegetation dramatically. And now it's all skeleton weed, I guess is what it's called,
Yeah.
on the more spacing slopes. How does that affect the carbon, or does it affect the carbon at all?
Yeah.
Sequesters?
Yeah, it depends. So the big thing that carbon on the landscape out here that is dependent on is rooting depth, so below ground inputs. So as we get plant chases, like cheatgrass comes in, cheatgrass roots won't go like this deep, right? So compared to perennial grasses that go, many feet deep, that's much less carbon going in the soil. So we have changes based on vegetation type like that. The other dominant thing that played out with the shrubs is also we call quality of the plant material. As you get more fibrous, as you get more wood-like, that breaks down much slower. It has much less nitrogen in it, and the microbes aren't able to break that down as easily. So that's where those shifts in plant communities are really dependent on what is the shift. So some of the larger invasive weeds are pretty fibrous, and they have decently deep roots, versus cheatgrass is neither. So it's terrible for carbon stocks. So it can kind of play out in different ways. But soil carbon's a lot slower to respond. You can see those above ground influences. You can see cheatgrass invasion in real time, year after year photos, right? Below ground, it's going to be buffered from that change. So the soil carbon doesn't just go down the minute the vegetation changes. It may take a decade to go down.
One of the things I'd add too, and Alex Brooks is here, she's on our climate action team, and Martha Brayback's our restoration specialist. But I think using this tool is going to be really helpful for us for not only land management decisions, but kind of what you stated is just a data point for Alex and her team to start somewhere. So we've really had no data.
Yeah.
And so being able to start somewhere and then use that in the next 50, 75 years just to see what happens. So,
Absolutely. My 2 cents takeaway from this is that the shrubland communities are really important when it comes to carbon. And then the second part is really, now you have a starting point data set. So if you guys can afford to or deem it necessary to do this again in probably something along 8 to 10 years, you'll learn a lot when you do this again in 8 to 10 years, because you'll be able to say, how did the plant community change? We now have the imagery to keep up with that. So I could map the vegetation change, right, over time. And then if you collect, probably won't need as many samples next time. But if you collect a smaller subset, you could get this, what is actually happening out here. And could be very interesting for the areas you've restored and things like that, that especially really put numbers on the impact of that. So this is a great starting point.
That was kind of my question. Obviously, we want to preserve the
existing plant material out there, but are there studies that have shown that restoring areas that are covered in annual grasses, does it increase the carbon that's able to be stored in the soil, or is it the disturbance more of an issue?
You can absolutely recover your soil carbon stocks through restoration work. What we see happen a lot though is that it takes a really long time to get all the way back to where you were. So most of the studies I've seen with cattle grazing or big changes in plant communities, and you see these big drops in soil carbon stocks, when you restore the area, you get a pretty rapid increase back towards what you had before. You get maybe 80% back to what you had, and then getting that last 20% back takes decades. So that's kind of the reason to try to avoid disturbance in the first place. It's that it's really hard to get all the way back to stocks that are out there. Climate change is affecting this landscape a lot. It sits right in an area, you can see it from top to bottom, where there's a lot of water at the top, there's almost no water at the bottom. As we get hotter, drier, things like that, we're gonna see the landscape really respond to that.
So Madam President, the punchline on this though, if you were explaining this to somebody that doesn't understand anything you're talking about here, or why this is important, what would you say, why is 1.5 million metric tons of carbon important?
Yeah, it's really, climate goals are about 1,000 drops in the bucket, 1 million drops in the bucket, right? The city of Boise is putting their drop in the bucket to help with all of these different goals of where we want to be in the future towards carbon neutral and slowing down climate change. So that's big picture how you're contributing. Local picture how you're contributing is you're understanding the sensitivity of this landscape. You're understanding better how to maintain the health of the landscape, the beauty of the landscape, these recreational areas. By understanding soil carbon, you understand how healthy it is and how you can improve health, things like that. That entire ecosystem runs on soil carbon. Is the #1 thing gluing it all together, right? So the more you understand that, and whether, like I said, in 8 years or something, if you understand we're losing it, right? Or maybe hopefully we're gaining, but if we're losing our soil carbon out on that landscape, you're gonna say, we're headed towards looking like the Oahe Desert on the Front Range. And that provides the city an opportunity to do something about it.
Can I ask another question? Sorry, I have some.
No, you're
A lot of times in the sustainability world, we're looking at new technologies like carbon capture, the shiny new thing that's out there to try to get us to these carbon neutral goals. Do you think that there's value in instead putting more resources towards nature-based solutions like restoration in order to do more carbon sequestration? Or do you think that like the tech solutions are going to outtime those natural solutions?
Natural solutions are really important for the landscapes themselves. So in this, to me, this is one of the most important areas of this whole region that an entire community relies upon for recreation, and people move here for the Boise Foothills, right? So when it comes to the importance of maintaining that area, this is kind of nature-based solutions are the only way to go, right? When it comes to big picture about what we're actually doing in the face of climate change, it's back to those drops in the bucket. We need everything we can get.
We'll make sure and get, oh, sorry, Matt.
We have about a little less than 6,000 acres that the city owns. And then, of course, didn't the BLM also do a sequestration project on the BLM land that's out in the valley? And then there's also been a carbon sequestration for the trees in the valley. Wasn't there also a plan done for that?
I know
We didn't pay
there's
for
work
it.
done, I know there's work done, a lot of work done out in the Birds of Prey area,
Okay.
OCTC, that area, BLM funded, I'm pretty sure, USDS funded maybe.
Yeah.
Trees, I don't know.
And then there was one, I think there was one for the tree canopy for the Treasure Valley as well. So.
Perhaps
They've
so.
calculated how much carbon is being sequestered by the
Yeah.
trees that are being planted.
Because I mean, it is, I mean, like you said, this is less than 6,000 acres, it's a drop in the bucket. So I was just curious about those.
But the thing is, I
Six
think
as well.
that's important to remember is that because this is such a big data set, you can use these data
Yeah.
plus the others that other scientists who we collaborate with.
Yeah.
We can extrapolate out to many other places. So that is the value, is that we can, go out and collect all these soils and then extrapolate and get.
Yeah, it's
more
right
data.
here. You can do this every year. You can go out and collect and just see different data points, yeah.
Right, and any ecosystem around here that looks like this one, we can apply these data to it to create a model that will do the same thing.
We'll make sure and I'll get the link and send out the link so people can play with the map and look at it. And then just let us know if you guys have any questions. Thank you so much for.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And I have one
Oh, sorry,
comment too.
Lauren.
No, it's all right. It just, there was direct management implications that we have
Yeah.
also gathered utilizing this data that I wanted you guys to know about. Like, for example, Hawkins Range Reserve is the open space reserve with the most amount of soil carbon. I know this because I just looked at Richie's thesis yesterday. And he recommended exclusion of wildfire from that landscape, or protection from wildfire is really, really important, because if that landscape were to burn and be converted to an annual grassland, we would lose a lot of soil carbon. And so I think this ties in with some of the work we've been doing in the past and also guides future efforts. We could do additional treatments on that landscape to reduce invasive annual grasses, to try and change fire behavior if it's moving up the foothills. And also there was a recommendation to plant a polecat, because that place has an opportunity to sequester more carbon if there was more shrub cover. So these are direct things that we will move forward with.
Because I know Hawkins Ranch was raised for consistently for 100 years.
Yeah.
And it's still grazing down there off of Sweet Connie.
You got it.
That's private property.
Yeah.
Still.
But it does have the highest perennial bunch grass as well as shrub cover out of any of our open space reserves. And we know this from data we collected in 2018. We collected the data again in 2025. I don't have it ready yet. But we can tie some of these carbon data points also to our vegetation inventory and say, these are good places to work to try and sequester more soil carbon.
How does wildlife impact all this?
In what sense?
Well, like Hawkins Range Reserve, we have a large elk population in there. So they're consuming a lot of the
Yeah,
probably high carbon material that we have,
Um,
right?
certainly, or usually, as long as you avoid overgrazing, the wildlife actually tends to be beneficial for soil carbon stocks. As long as it's not heavily overgrazed and disturbed, yeah. So a migratory, elk population, not a problem.
I'd like to add one more thing. We also, every time we collected soil samples, we created, we had a 10 by 10 meter square, and we put like a cross in the middle, and we collected plant community data along there. So we have an idea of how plant communities were associated with the different soil samples. And you have that plant community map that was produced by Ecosystem Sciences. And so you can actually use our data to look at the validity of that map, because perhaps it changed over time. And those data we should have gone soon, and we'll send.
Oh, and it would be,
Yeah.
we want to update that map, so that's wonderful.
That was like an add-on. We're like, well, while we're in here, might as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great, that's wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Yep, thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good. Your first meeting.
Thank you.
Remember Steve again.
So, do we?
Oh,
Well, there we go.
thank you.
Yeah.
Bye, thank you.
Okay, we do have an executive session, so in order to begin, we will need a motion. Is there a motion? Is there a second? Is there a second?
Sure. Yes, I'll second it. Okay, executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 74-2061C to acquire an interest in real property which is not owned by a public agency. Idaho Code 74-2061F to communicate with legal counsel for the public agency. Discuss legal ramifications of legal options for pending litigation or controversies not yet being litigated, but imminently likely to be litigated.
And then you want to do a roll call real quick.
Condi,
Are we
We're doing a roll call.
Just
just
roll
to
call
go
vote.
into executive session?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Crier,
Yes.
LaRue. Yes. Fondy,
Yes.
Rayburn. Bowen,
Yes.
Teddy,
Yes.
and Dell.
Yeah.
Okay, let me stop the recording now. Okay, Fondy,
Yes.
Crier,
Yes.
LaRue. Yes. Fondy,
Yes.
Rayburn. Bowen,
Yes.
Teddy,
Yes.
Dallas.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Do we have any other news? Any stuff catch us up on? What's your last day?
October 31st.
Oh, so we'll probably see you one more time.
I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Lisa's saying that's for sure, but we'll see.
Has your successor been named yet?
That will happen in about a month, a little over a month. So there's two finalists. One is in-house, which is Sarah Arkle, and the other is an out-of-state candidate. And so those interviews will happen mid-September. So our hope is the right choice is made. And she'll be ready to start.
So
the first one, around the first one, but she'll actually start November 1.
Let's adjourn first.
Yeah, that's okay. My support is I want it public.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, a motion to adjourn.
okay, is there a second?
Forgot.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I.
Thank you, everyone online.